Hi, Kaushik. Yeah, I'm Nicholas. I'm also a member of a Lion Fund. Now, two questions actually. My first question was, how do you see kind of recruitment differing between, the bulge brackets and the boutique banks? Kind of different strategies and approaches for both.
You should just try to get to go to kind of the best firm you can get into, number one. Number two, also where you think you'll get the best set of experiences. And then number three, where you think the exit ops are going to be like the most favorable. Again, if you are at all concerned about these things already, right? So I think if the exit ops
Right.
is less concerning for you, don't worry about it yet. But I think generally, right, your banking experience is going to be somewhat similar. In other words, the crux, if someone comes and tells me I was an investment banking analyst, I kind of know 80% of the work that they did. So whether it's on real deals or live pitches, you kind of know they're doing financial analysis, they're doing, SIMs, they're doing sell side processes, IPOs, buy side processes, maybe some sort of more technical analyses. But generally, no, it's less so on the buy side. So we'll get to that later. But I think when someone comes and tells me there, so I wouldn't stress out way too much between like, oh, I really need to go to this bank versus not. Because guys, I sit on this side, and it's funny if you look at some of the Elevate training and you hear from professionals, every single professional says recruiting is like super haphazard, right? Recruiting is just so random. So you just don't know how things are going to pan out. But how do you position yourself, right? So your question on bulge bracket versus boutique. In my mind, there isn't as much of a difference, honestly, between those two things, because just like Columbia is not necessarily a destination, even though it's a great university, it's kind of what's next, right? So I almost kind of think like wherever you go, you have to have a little bit of your mindset into what are you going to use that platform to do in your career, right? So it's not like the first job is not like the end of the world by any means, right? So if you think of learning opportunities, yes, presumably like the top, if you look through the league table, the reality is that's an indication of how, much deal activity as it at these different banks. So you can take that as a metric. But I think equally important, I think you should take the metric of, look, what are industry groups you're interested in? Like if you get an offer at two different industry groups and you really like healthcare versus technology, go join the industry that you're actually interested in, where you're uniquely positioned to actually add value, right? So less so into kind of names. I think everyone ends up going and kind of going down the name path anyway, but I just kind of challenge you guys that there's a couple other things you want to kind of think about as a holistic picture. And as far as elite boutiques concerned, like, look, I had on my training like a principal from Centerview, someone from Evercore, and so like we talked about kind of that boutiques versus banking. Whereas on the Bulge back side, I had an ED from Morgan Stanley on, 4 or 5 people from Goldman overall. Generally, the sentiment is like you could be successful regardless. Or boutiques in general, you probably also like have more of an opportunity to step up at a boutique, whereas it's really hard because there's so many associates, right? It's hard pressed that you'll find like that there's no associate. Whereas a lot of my, peers or people at, some of these boutiques, often teams, it's just an MD and the analyst. So you do get to do a lot more work. So I think that is actually really, really important as well. And then finally, I think exit ops are important. I think for you guys, if you're really, really concerned about that, I don't think you should be like super duper concerned about that right now, because things just play out in a way that they do that's often out of your control. I think if that is of concern to you, investigate like who and where firms and people end up in these careers, and kind of what that makes sense for yourself, and kind of maybe use that as a way to think about it. I'm a firm believer in like, look, I'm a firm believer in that like wherever you start has like little to no bearing kind of how your career goes. Like